Welcome to this Zoom meeting of the Wingecarribee Local Planning Panel on 6 October 2021. I declare the meeting open at 3:30 p.m. My name is Julie Walsh and I'm the chair of today's panel. Also sitting on the panel today are expert members Alf Lester and Larissa Ozog and community member Richard Colley. There are some technical matters to start with. If everybody could please place themselves on mute until they're invited to speak, and that way we won't get any feedback which may interfere with people being able to hear properly. If there are any technical difficulties experienced by a speaker, we may move to the next speaker if they can't be resolved, and a council officer will phone on the number provided. I would ask everyone to please be patient in the event that there are technical difficulties. I also need to advise that the meeting is being live streamed to the council website, and the recording will be made available on the website after the meeting. I'll start with the acknowledgement of country. Wingecarribee Shire Council acknowledges the Gundungurra and Tharawal people as the traditional custodians of this land we now call the Wingecarribee Shire. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I would also like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders present here today. There are no apologies. There is only one declaration of interest from Larissa Ozog, who has declared a non-pecuniary less than significant interest in items 5.1 and 6.1, as she sits on the Wollongong Local Planning Panel alongside Scott Lee, the applicant's consultant in both matters, and both are expert panel members on that panel. She has no other professional or personal relationship with Mr. Lee, and therefore the interest is non-pecuniary and non-significant, and she may participate in those two items. The procedure for the meeting, the council website contains a copy of the operational guidelines for the panel meetings. They're slightly modified today as it is a Zoom meeting, but I'll summarise the most important points. All panel members have read the business paper and received a detailed briefing from council officers, which has included visual aids such as Google Maps and other aids, given that due to the COVID-19 health orders, it has not been possible for the expert members to carry out physical site inspections. The community member, Richard Colley, has carried out site inspections in relation to all but one of the sites. The panel is charged with determining the 3 development applications and providing advice to council on the 2 planning proposals on the agenda today. We'll hear from registered speakers. There are actually no objectors registered to speak today. We have speakers for one of the DA items and the 2 planning proposal items on behalf of the applicant proponents. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes, but that may be extended at my discretion. And following speaking, if you could remain available, as the panel may have questions, and I may seek a response to any issue raised from the relevant council officer. Once a speaker has spoken, they will not be permitted to speak again unless it's in response to a question by the chair or other panel member. When we've heard from all speakers, we'll move into closed session to deliberate and prepare our minutes, and then we will return to announce the determinations, and that will be live streamed, and that will be then available on the website. And the aim will be to have the minutes on the council website within 2 business days. So if I could now start with the first item, 5.1, development application 21/1641, subdivision of land to create 2 lots at 77 Bowral Street, Bowral. I understand that Scott Lee, the applicant's consultant, is available to answer any questions that the panel may have. Is Mr. Lee there? Good afternoon, Mr. Lee.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Thank you. So I think you didn't want to prepare, you hadn't prepared a presentation, but you're available to answer questions, because I think we did have some questions in relation to this one. But if you wanted to say anything first, by all means, do so.
Oh, no, thank you, Chair. No, I'm quite happy just to answer some questions. We're supportive, obviously, of the recommendation for approval, and throughout that process, assessment process, we've worked with the council staff to try and resolve some issues that they had. So we're quite pleased with the recommendation. So happy to answer some of those questions, and to the best of my ability, we'll see if what goes from there. So over to you, I suppose.
Okay, so I might get Larissa and Alf to ask their questions first,
Sure.
and then finish up with any that haven't been covered. But the only question I wanted to ask first was, have you gone through the recommended conditions of consent?
Yeah, I've got them in front of me now. The report.
Right.
I haven't yet come across any that were problematic or.
Oh, okay. So the one I wanted to ask you about was the engineers had recommended that that there be a 6 metre wide vehicular access right. I'll get Larissa and Alf to ask their questions first, and then finish up with any that haven't been covered. But the only question I wanted to ask first was, have you gone through the recommended?
Oh.
Yeah, I think, did you still have the live stream on? Or?
I haven't turned it on at all. No.
Oh, okay. Has somebody got the live stream on? Is everyone on mute? Okay, all right. So I can't remember. Oh, yeah, so there was a recommended condition that came from the engineers that there be a 6 metre wide right-of-way over lot 31 in favour of lot 32 for vehicular access.
Yes.
Had you come across that condition?
I'm just searching for it now. My understanding was that was for emergency vehicle usage, because there was an issue raised by the council engineers about the adequacy of the driveway access onto Bendooley Street for the existing house not being wide enough to service an emergency vehicle. And that's the reason why that right of carriageway provision was included. But I understood it was for that particular purpose. And in that case, we don't have any objection to that.
Right. So my
just trying to find.
Yeah, I'm not sure where the condition is, but I did see it. So my question in relation to that is, so there's an okay. So on the plan of proposed subdivision, it shows the existing circular driveway, which I scale off at about 3 metres in width. Have you given any consideration as to what would be the location of such a vehicular access way over lot 31?
No, not particularly, not as yet. That would need to have some consideration. I mean, obviously, if the approval is granted to create the 2 lots, there would need to be an application or a proposition put forward for a dwelling upon the new lot, and the right of carriageway would need to be started so as not to completely compromise the future development of that lot. So the short answer is no. We haven't yet given significant thought to where it would be, but its location would make sure that the development potential for a house on the new lot isn't compromised. I'm just reading the wording of that condition. Like it just says the right of carriageway and easement for services 6 wide over lot 31 in favour of lot 32. It doesn't talk about it being restricted in any way for emergency type vehicles. That was my understanding, that was the reason why it would be needed, because the existing house has a driveway that is functional and used. It goes directly onto Bendooley Street, directly into a garage for the rear house on lot 31, lot 32. So I would have thought that the concept of having the right of carriageway and opportunity for emergency vehicles was fair and reasonable, but I'm not so convinced that it's necessary to provide access to the existing house on a regular basis, because that house already has access to Bendooley Street.
So I think the condition requires it to be created at the time of the plan of subdivision, so it couldn't really wait for the DA for the dwelling house.
No, that's right. But we would need to give thought to it immediately, and so we could put back a reasonable plan to council to give effect to that condition. The applicant or the landowner isn't adverse to the idea of that front lot having a right of carriageway. But obviously we would be looking to place it so it doesn't compromise unfairly the potential of the new lot. And I think the point I'm making is in the previous discussions that idea was put forward more in the context of use by emergency vehicles, particularly as distinct from day-to-day usage.
Okay, so Alf, did you have some questions you wanted to raise? Alf Lester? Maybe I'll start with Larissa. Do you want to take yourself off mute? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Scott, I just wanted to ask in relation to tree loss. It was one thing that I know in the report it said that there's 3 small shrubs or something that are to be removed. But when you look on the aerial, obviously, because we haven't been able to do an actual site inspection, it does look like there's a lot of trees. And also on the indicative site plan and layout of the dwelling that you kind of anticipate that may be put on that new lot at the front, it does seem like there is a big tree that would require removal. I did ask council for an arborist report just to get a very clear idea of what tree loss would occur if a property was to go on there. And I didn't get a response to that. So I just thought I'd ask you in terms of your understanding of the vegetation and what will be lost if you did put a dwelling on that front lot.
Yeah, well, I think the plan you're referring to is on page 7. I think it is figure 4 in the report, the indicative building footprint. There's certainly extensive garden and extensive plantings in the front portion of the property, and there is one larger tree, and forgive me, I'm not too sure exactly what that specimen is, that is the most significant of those trees, which is in that figure 4, just to the north of the outlined house. That's probably the one that's most significant. The majority of others in that part of the site are, as described, more shrubs and probably wouldn't be actually defined as trees as such. But it's that large one there that I think in that indicative envelope would be, I'd have to admit, would be questionable as it was whether or not that was retained or not. It would seem to me to be quite reasonable that perhaps some indication of retention of that might be reasonable and suitable. Coming forward to the north, between the indicative building envelope and the street, there is approximately, I think that's probably about, given that lot's about 65 metres deep, there's a good 35 to 40 metre setback from the street to that building envelope. There's a large number of planted exotic trees in there. And they're not necessarily going to be affected at all, even by the right of carriageway if that's imposed, because the driveway that exists now will still service the house, and the right of carriageway will probably then only be amended in the area of where the circular driveway is, and it'll probably just move to the eastern boundary where there's no significant trees. So I think the tree loss issue is confined to that one larger specimen immediately to the north of the envelope. And in that sense, I think that it might be reasonable to put some sort of condition or requirement for an arborist report or safeguard that. I don't see that it would be unreasonably restrictive on a future building if that tree was to be retained.
Okay, and just one other issue was the heritage. There's some issue, obviously council's heritage consultant is not supportive of the scheme.
Yes.
And I suppose from the panel's perspective, and I speak kind of collectively, even though the decision hasn't been made or anything, is basically the non-compliance with the lot. So one is significantly smaller than the 2 hectares because it's over 30%, I think, variation.
Yeah.
So it's quite a significant variation. And I just wanted your opinion in terms of the heritage conservation area, the character, those few lots that are larger that have a kind of character, and how this will change that, and whether and it's siting in the conservation area and the character, that kind of setting.
Yeah, thank you. Well, when I spoke to the applicant in the first instance, I said that the approach here should be to ensure that we worked as hard as possible to maintain the streetscape aspects in the conservation area, because they were the most important issues. What we've done is create a compliant lot to the street. So that lot is a compliant allotment of 2,000 square metres. So that's where we started from. And the resultant, the second lot, which has the existing house set right back on the southern boundary, is the residual. Yep. That just happens to be the 1,300 square metres.
Oh, I should keep quiet. Sorry, I'll just mute.
So we've got a compliant lot onto the street. We can still maintain a very significant street setback to any new dwelling, and that indicative building footprint shows that, and that's a setback, in the order of 40 metres. That's generous in any sense. This lot we're talking about is one of it's 5 lots in that stretch of Barrel Street that are similar to this one. Large lots with houses set back. The lot immediately to the east already while it's one parcel, one ownership, is already 3 lots. And one of those lots in its own right already has a dwelling entitlement that could be utilised to build a house in front of the existing house. So that's 2 out of the 5 already. The next one to the east is a 4,000 square metre lot, which could be subdivided into 2 compliant lots. So there's 3 out of the 5. The next one is a well-established medical practice that's been a medical practice now for goodness knows how long, well over 20 years. It's unlikely to be changed. The house and the medical practice are well back, but there is still 2,000 square metres, in the order of 2,000 square metres in front of that could also be subdivided into a compliant lot. That leaves one more to the east again, and that house is set well back, and that's been previously a guest house, and it's got a very nice front garden, and it's debatable as to whether or not anyone would like to do anything with that. I don't know. And then you get to there are I think 3 more houses before you get to the intersection of Sheffield Road, and there's that lot is the first of those lots is much smaller than the other 5, and the house is well forward already. It's only on a setback of about 15 metres already, and that's not subdivisible, I don't think, under any circumstances, and the house is already forward. And then you have 2 very small ones towards the corner, one of which has just got an approval for a new dual occupancy on the corner, so there'll be a new house and another house on that corner. So there's only, of the 5 lots, as I've described, they're already going to be or have development approval or potential in a similar way to this. So we set out to make sure we had a compliant lot to the street. We do. We've acknowledged that the house, any future house there, will be well set back, and it will. And so we don't see that while there will be a change, I think that change is inevitable anyway, given the current circumstances of the other lots. And I don't think that change will be as detrimental as the council's heritage officer has expressed in his comments. So, and I think the key to that is make sure that whatever happens, there is a significant setback from the street to any new building, and that's what we've provided.
Okay, thank you. You didn't get a heritage consultant to do an impact
No, we didn't.
statement.
No, we didn't. I mean, again, through the statement of environmental effects, I tried to cover the issue as to or acknowledge that it was in the heritage conservation area, then covered the issue as to why the outcome wasn't detrimental through the statement and through the clause 4.6 variation request.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
So Alf Lester, did you have any questions?
I think in part,
Thank you.
can you hear me now?
Yep.
In part, the questions that I was going to raise have been touched on, but I think by implication, Scott has indicated that it's almost inevitable in his view. And I suppose my concern has been that the approval of this particular development would set up a pattern which would then enable the adjacent lots to adopt a similar approach and be served from Bowral. Would still need a 6-metre access to the existing housing, which is mainly located to the south of these larger lots. And therefore, there would be either a right-of-way or a separable road. So even with the 4,000 metres, you still have a separable road or a right-of-way carriageway 6 metres wide to make some of those developments possible. It would seem to me that acceptance of this particular principle sets up the opportunity for it to be used as a precedent. And at present, my understanding is that all of the changes that have taken place took place a long time ago. The approvals took place a long time ago, prior to the introduction of the heritage impact and the heritage area control on this area in 2010. So I'd just like to get the comment that this has the potential to change the character in very much the way that Scott went through each of the lots and identified how it may change. But that's a concern because it doesn't seem to address the issues raised by Larissa and by the heritage officer and his comments about the changing character, nor the fact that there is a minimum lot size in this specific area.
Yes, okay, thank you. I suppose it would be naive of me to say that there isn't a potential precedent or an example that others may look to in the future. I mean, they may if they choose to. That alone isn't reason that I would have fought to not approve this or conversely approve others. But the point I was trying to make was that the circumstances here are not dissimilar to what can occur already on the other lots. I suppose maybe the root cause of that or the root problem is that the council has zoned the land R2 low density and they put a 2,000 square metre limit on that, okay? But there are lots there that, you know, can utilise that already without any variation. And if there was to be no development potential at all, a different choice could have been made in those development standards. The approach we took, or the logic that we brought to it, was that the significant aspect of this in the conservation area was larger lots, but with deep setbacks on that side of Bowral Street. You'll notice on the northern side of Bowral Street, that's not the case at all. It's completely different again, where the lots aren't as deep and the houses are much closer to Bowral Street. So it's only these half a dozen, or in fact 5 lots that have got this particular character of the houses set very deep to the south of the properties with very large setbacks. If the subdivision it proceeds and then other subdivisions proceed, which I think could happen regardless of this decision, we reduce the setback to the built form as it is now, but we maintain what most people would consider still to be a very generous setback to the street, something in the order, in our case, in the order of 35 to 40 metres. I'm not too sure that is, well, it's different to what's there now. I'm not convinced that it's so detrimental to the character of the conservation area that it should be refused.
The only provision is that none of the blocks you're referring to have an alternate access as 77 does from Bendooley. Well, so they rely totally on access from Bowral.
Yeah, that is true. Absolutely true. And all of those lots have existing points of access onto Bowral Street. And my view would be that all of those points of access would be suitable to service 1 and or 2 lots. So there wouldn't be a change to the streetscape from that point of view. It's then what happens within within the property that is open to some sort of debate. And then again, most of those lots as they exist now wouldn't need radical difference to the internal driveway in order to serve one or two dwellings. So I don't think there'd be any particular difference to the streetscape from a driveway point of view.
Well, I think I'm not sure about that, because the requirement, you may comment, under council's recommendation was that a 6-metre reservation for emergency vehicles be maintained. And that would apply to all of the other lots in question.
That's right, but that's a 6-metre wide, the council's 6-metre wide driveway or easement for access, and then a 4.5 metre carriageway is the standard council requirement for an access handle or a right of carriageway. So it can serve both purposes. I mean, we wouldn't be looking at having a driveway for a house and then an additional 6-metre wide easement and driveway for emergency vehicles. That's not what's contemplated. So each of these existing allotments along this strip of Barrel Street, like I said, has a point of access, a driveway onto Barrel Street, which would be suitable for one or two dwellings. Within the property, they have existing driveways that can also be suitable for one or two dwellings. So the change in terms of the driveways, if subdivision was to occur, in my mind, would be minimal.
Well, I can pick you up on that, because the access to 77, as I read it in the photographs that I've seen, imply that the driveway is perhaps 3 metres, maybe a little bit more, and there's a big turnaround adjacent to the existing house with a water feature. So it would mean expanding that driveway to meet council's technical requirements, or an alternate, and particularly if it has to deflect either to the east or west to reach access to the house behind.
Well, then, yes, you are correct. And again, there would be need to do some modification to the driveway as it exists now to meet the council's standard. But I don't believe that that's a radically different outcome than what is there now, and certainly not at the street frontage. And that first portion of the allotment, which is the most important from the streetscape point of view.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you have any questions, Mr. Colley?
No, I'm happy with what I've heard.
Okay. So my only question left is, Mr. Lee, do you have the plan on figure 5 on page 14 of the report?
Yeah, excuse me, I'll just pull it back up again. It's on my screen here. Figure 5, yes, I've got that.
So 81, 83, 85 and 87, they're all below 4,000 square metres, so none of them would be able to be subdivided without a clause 4.6. Do you agree?
Okay, so well, certainly in relation to 81, I stand corrected. My rough calculations was that was 4,000. Perhaps I've left out. There's a small parcel at the bottom right, bottom what would be the southeast corner of lot 81, or number 81 rather, which I think may not have been included in that side area. But on those figures in front of me, on that is correct. Yes.
And do you know if any of these lots just on that figure 5 have been created since LEP 2010 came into force?
I do not believe so. They're all older allotments. Actually, none of them, as far as I'm aware, have been the subject of a DA for subdivision. Not that I'm aware of, no.
And do you know, was the 2,000 square metre minimum lot size, just taking this street block here on figure 5, was that in existence prior to LEP 2010, or did it come in when LEP 2010 came in?
No, my understanding is that is a carryover from the 1989 plan.
Right, okay. All right. Okay, no, I didn't have any other questions. So Alf and Larissa, you didn't have any more questions?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you,
Pat.
So the next two DA items don't have any speakers. And then Mr. Lee, you're speaking in relation to planning proposal item 5.1?
6.1.
6.1, sorry.
Chair, happy again to answer any questions if you have any, but quite happy with the recommendation.
Yeah, so I think I was just concerned to make sure that if the proposal proceeds and it's gazetted and then there's a subdivision application, that everyone's assuming that the lots will be connected to the sewer. So I just wanted to ask you, is that your understanding of the intention, and how could we secure that?
Well, again, currently we have been working on on-site effluent disposal options if necessary. I mean, my understanding of that is that if the sewer is available, well, then the council can insist that that be done, and that makes sense to me. I mean, that's a reasonable request. But if it's not achievable or reasonable to do that, well, then the sites can be serviced. They are large enough and have the capacity to be treated with or serviced by on-site effluent disposal. And that's an issue that will be properly investigated and put forward in the DA.
For the subdivision.
The DA for the subdivision, yes, correct.
Yeah. And the sewer is available, I understand. That's what I've been
sewer is available in the locality.
Yeah.
It's a matter of connection and how to do that in a reasonable manner. At which point in the system can these lots actually connect, and is that a viable option? And if so, well, then that's the expectation. That's what would happen. If the applicant in this case reaches a conclusion that they would prefer not to do that and to go for on-site effluent disposal, I think my understanding is the site has the capacity to handle that, but the council may insist that they don't think that that's the option and they should enforce the connection to the sewer. And that's an issue that will be properly explored and determined ultimately by the council as part of the development application process. Okay.
And the second question was the question about access on the basis that on the plan shown on page 149 of an indicative subdivision, so lot 1 has an existing easement access,
yes,
but lot 3 and lot 2 on that plan don't, and it's indicated that there could be a potential for a roadway, for the road to be constructed there. Is that economically viable?
Well, again, depends on the level of construction that the council would accept within that, what is called Braddon Road. That's it's a gazetted public road reservation, but it's not formed. What's shown in figure 5 there is an option that's available, and to service 2 of the 3 lots. Now, council has certain policies that would allow a certain level of construction for that length of Braddon Road if it's servicing those 2 lots. Again, a DA process will properly discuss and determine what is suitable and what is not. I mean, if the council turned around and said to the applicant, if that was their proposition, you have to construct that to our normal road standard of 15 metres wide and curb and gutter, well then clearly no, it's not going to be possible or viable to do that. But to service 2 lots in that location through that road reserve at a lesser standard, more of a internal driveway standard with perhaps occasional passing bay, that's probably more likely to be a reasonable and viable option. But that hasn't been properly explored because we haven't yet lodged an application for the subdivision. We're just trying at the moment, or up till now, concentrating on trying to get the planning proposal finalised, which is what the recommendation is. And that will be a trigger for my clients to be able to put forward a properly packaged DA for consideration. And that's one of the options. Lot 1 in that scheme has the existing rights already off Bulwer Road. That's the terms of that access and that easement, between the property burden and the property benefited, and they can change. That's another option. But Braddon Road is certainly there as a legal road reserve, and that remains as an option. And ultimately, a decision for council as to if they accept that option as what they want in terms of construction, and for the applicant to determine whether or not that's viable.
Thank you. Can I just ask one more question about that access? On page 143, it shows the subject site. So are there 3 lots in that configuration?
There are 3 lots now.
Right. And so which of those lots has the benefit of the right of access?
Oh, on that diagram, the one on the right.
Okay. So my question is, the subdivision layout on 149.
Yes.
A large chunk of, I see. So the right of access would only come to that section on that far right hand one. Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Because the right of access is only for that part of the lot. Yeah.
Yeah, where that existing house is.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. I didn't have anything. Did you have any questions, Alf?
Just one quick question. My understanding is that the land to the east is also capable of subdivision, and that may have an effect on the timing of any road, a proper road, a council equivalent road on Braddon Road. Is that one of the considerations?
Oh, well, you are correct. The land to the east is in exactly the same circumstance as my client's land in terms of planning controls proposed. And it's got subdivision potential for, I think it's 5 or 6 lots. Ideally, it would be a great opportunity for the parties to combine resources and do something together. Not arguing that at all, and that would be ideal. But that hasn't been possible up till now. But that's not to say that it can't be. And it might prove to be the best option in the long term.
Well, the other question that flows from that, given your comment and given the sketchy drawing on 149, are you aware that council's accepted a lesser level of road to any new lot being created in the past? Because that's what's implied in the drawing showing access on Braddon Road.
Council's got a policy, and there's standard drawings available through council's engineering specifications that I think that's a little bit small. Let me see if I can blow that up. I think that reference number is there somewhere. I can't remember. It's just trying to find it there. Mr. Lester, the answer is yes, I believe they have. Please don't ask me to name the property because I won't be able to. But the council has the discretion there. Oh, there it is. Sorry, SD 121, standard drawing 121. That's a standard drawing or standard engineering specification for a road or in a circumstance such as this. It's open to the applicant, obviously, at this stage, if we put forward that proposition in DA to do so, and it's open for council to say we accept that or not. So there is, it wouldn't be unique if that happened. We certainly, if we are reliant on Braddon Road, would be relying on that standard drawing specification because it's simply not possible to do anything more and make the project a viable project. I think that's pretty well.
For this subdivision to be approved and implemented, you certainly need public road access. And so you're really dependent on Braddon Road, are you not? Without
the working together with the landowner of the property to the east, we need to, in a DA for a subdivision, we need to show council that we have suitable public road access for the lots. That is correct. Lot 1 in this proposition here has that. Lots 2 and 3. That figure 5 shows how that would be achieved, and that's the result of that is part of what the DA is about.
But that in turn would be subject to council approving a rather unusual link from a cul-de-sac to within a public road to lot 2.
That's true. That's not unusual in my mind. Having, you know, a level of construction within the public road reserve, and then having an extended, what is a small extension which acts as a driveway to a single property. That happens all over the place. Again, it's subject to lodgement in the first instance by the owners, which we haven't done. That's not a DA there on that page. And to council in accepting whatever it is we put forward. So we acknowledge all of that. But the report today is simply about the planning proposal, and what our planning proposal did was no more than what council had recommended be done, which was to change the subdivision lot size. And as I pointed out just a minute ago, we already have 3 lots.
Yep.
We're just probably wanting to use the new provisions to recreate 3 lots that work better.
Thank you.
Okay.
Did anyone else have any questions?
Can I just ask a quick question? Do you know how wide is that Brennan Road? Is it fairly wide?
I think it's 20 metres, a 20 metre reservation.
Okay, right.
Yeah, so it's plenty wide
so
enough.
It's substantial. Yeah. No worries.
There's no restriction there. It's plenty wide enough, but we wouldn't be wanting to construct 20 metre wide width of road.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, no, that's fine. Thanks.
Did you have any questions, Richard?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Lee. So
Okay.
We've got one more item with speakers, and then we'll go into closed session and come back and give our determination. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, so item 6.2, I've got 2 speakers. So who wants to go first? I think Mr. Dawson, did you want to go first?
Yes, but hold on a second, I've just got to turn off my other thing.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm not sure I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. I can hear you, yep.
I can hear you. A small question. I know that it's a bit untoward. Do you mind if I put something up on the screen to look at? So
certainly not, no.
Just so you don't have to look at me. And Sophie's very easy to look at.
So I think Larissa and I met you at the special meeting about the housing strategy.
You did indeed, and we're on similar lines. We're generally supporting the proposal. Now, have I shared that screen? Just bear with me for a second. I'm having a few technical difficulties. That one. Share and. Do you have a pretty picture?
No.
You don't? You just got my head.
No, we've got something that says Tara Key, Southern Highway.
Okay, good. I'll get out of that straight away. So we generally support the recommendations, and for some reason, there we go. That's better.
Yeah.
Generally support the recommendations. We lodged this planning proposal just over a year ago, about 14 months ago, and we'd actually held it back for a time because we became aware of the housing strategy coming out. So we held it back, waited for the housing strategy, and then readapted it to the housing strategy. Our key aims obviously were to comply with the housing strategy and LSPS, and particularly all those things. But also we're aiming to assist in the targets of those two documents to give a diversity of housing through a range of lot sizes and types. We're also having a look at the need in the housing strategy for 20% of medium density. It might be a bit cute, but without doing medium density, but rather look at integrated housing or smaller lots. And in this planning proposal, we have applied the zones that will allow us to do that. I personally, and I'm not a planner, nor am I the owner of the land, but I personally would like to see more of what I would call the Tony Sabima model, which some of you may or may not be familiar with, which works on a particular lot depth and changes the lot frontages to give the diversification of housing, but also some smaller lots, salt and peppered amongst the larger lots, and you don't lose the streetscape through that. And that also helps very importantly with character, and character is a very big thing in the Wingecarribee Council. Character is mentioned everywhere, and what does character look like? So our intention with this, and things are high level as they should be in a planning proposal, we'll go into more detail as we go along the journey with council and the adjoining landowners and indeed the community. But for us at the moment, we're proposing that our character would be tied up in a set of urban design guidelines, which we would either work into the DCP or even put on title if that's appropriate. But again, working through with council. In terms of the project itself, I think I seem to have lost something there, but in terms of the project itself, we're pretty proud of this because we've been thinking a lot about this, that it for the first time opens this part of the Wingecarribee River to the good folk of Burradoo and indeed Bowral. And where not only, obviously you've got to reserve the riparian zones and keep a 100-metre buffer from the river, but in doing that and using the other constraints on the site, we're producing a relatively easy, accessible, walkable, accessible access to the river, which we've not had on this side of Bowral for a long time. But also we've tried to design in this layout a passive security over the river, and there's obviously going to be some discussion about that. There's really not very much impact on current amenity. When you look at it at this scale that we're looking at now, one might think so, but if you're standing on Erridge Park Road, and there's a photo later in this that shows that if you're standing on Erridge Park Road, you don't read what's going on at all, and this gives us the opportunity to open that up and obviously again address the housing things. We're also looking at, and we understand that there may be some resistance to this, it's probably best described as a village centre, probably more even a cafe shop down on the river, to give a focal point and a walkable focal point for people to do things down there. And it would be nice to do other things, but by no means do we want to become a neighbourhood or a suburban shopping centre. It's more a sort of a cafe community focal point on the river. Sorry, that's where my things went. I'll leave them behind. In servicing, we're very aware, and council have been consistent in the 14 months, well, longer, the 2 years that we've been dealing with council officers, but council have been consistent in making sure that we don't get what's happened before with rezonings in this council and in others, and that is that the land's rezoned without servicing properly accounted for. So you've seen in what we've lodged a very high level servicing plan, which is from one point of view the most pragmatic option and probably the most pragmatic option to get servicing going. We've also been participating in a council-led exercise with the adjoining landowners to look at how we might resolve the servicing collectively and the potential there. And we've not put anything aside, but the potential of funding that through either a Section 711 or a SIC-like arrangement or a collective VPA. But having said that, we have the ability to go it alone as well if so required. So we can do either or, and we're very willing to work through all of that with everyone and see what we can do. So from my point of view, I'm just going to let Sophie talk about some of the investigations for a moment, but from my point of view, I think in summary, this planning proposal has done everything we can at this stage to meet the housing strategy. I think there's some legacy issues there, and the family who own the land are very keen on that, to provide some access to the river and maintain character and produce something that's really good. But also, the nice thing about working on this project is the ability to work with people rather than, if you like, pushing it through or debating things. And so far, we've got a very collegiate approach to try and get this thing out. I'll let Sophie have a talk to you just generally at high level about investigation. We'd be both of us would be very happy to answer any questions after that. Sophie?
Thanks, Angus. Yeah, so just quickly running through the recommendations, the points of the recommendation. There's a great photo. See, it's quite hard to see from the street, but when you actually look at the photos, it's quite a flat piece of land, and few scattered trees around that we'll be keeping. But in terms of the recommendation points, I'd just like to say I acknowledge that council wants to hold back a little bit to get some other studies in place, and that's totally understandable. So for example, with the Wingecarribee River flood study that's currently on exhibition, we've done a preliminary water cycle management strategy, and from our initial investigations, the flood study on exhibition by council is matching up quite well with the flood constraints that we'd identified previously. So it looks like our proposed development footprint is fairly compatible with what will be the flood planning area. We're also very supportive of council wanting to have that master plan and servicing strategy approach, and we're ready to go whenever we can in terms of preparing that master plan wide servicing strategy. We've had, as Angus said, we've been participating in the landowner meetings, and there's a genuine interest in moving it forward from the other landowners in general. So in terms of planning and servicing, so we're very happy to proceed with that. We do acknowledge that there's a DSI that's needed, detailed site investigation, but the areas of potential contamination are quite isolated. There's some areas where there's been some past chemical storage and some fuel storage on the site, which isn't unusual for a rural property, but very standard remediation measures that will be required. In terms of the referral to New South Wales Heritage, yep, totally agree with that. We've got a couple of planning proposals, and New South Wales Heritage are usually the last ones to come to the table. So kicking that off now, we'd be very happy to start that. And acknowledge that, yes, once the flood study is completed, the master plan's completed, the servicing strategy is completed, there may be a few minor tweaks, but very happy to work with council on what that would be.
Thanks, and we're very happy to answer any questions.
Did you want to go first, Alf?
Yep, okay. Look, I think that there's a lot of work and a very detailed report, and the work that's been done on a wide range of issues. I think it's rewarding and good to see that that's happening. I have some reservations. I noticed, for example, that you had a plan by Marchese planners, but I think the plan in the structure plan by Cardno is slightly different. So I have some reservations about best planning practice being observed. I heard a lot of the good words about the importance of a linear open space that people can access and people can view. But I note that in some of the proposals, there were quite detailed R5 suggestions that would impact on that and be between people and the main linear open space. I think question about where you locate retail facility. I understand the importance of the river, but it's also got to be accessible for people who are living in the community. It should take that into consideration. At the moment, it's right on the extreme end of the linear system. And if you're looking for walkability, access to linear space and to open space becomes an important issue. So look, I think there's a slight difference between some of the Q100 flood event data and the layout. I noticed that there's a couple of what I'll call east-west laterals that go out from the main creek system under a Q100 flood condition, and they don't seem to be reflected in the layout. So I think that the principles are there, but they probably need to be worked through a little more as the more detailed planning, and I think you made the point about detailed site inspection or detailed site work is carried out. There would be subtle changes. I think the idea of a mix of units or mix of development type is useful, but I also question why you would have a medium density. Usually if you're putting a medium or lower density, higher density component, you usually try to take advantage of the aspect so that there's some benefit to the individuals and to the people at large, rather than consolidating them within the subdivision as appears in the structure plan at the moment. So in principle, I think that the intent is good. I think that the connectivity with the land to the east is something that needs to be looked at as well, and that's been mentioned. You referred to that in the discussion. I think that there is a long linear pattern with two connections or connections in the southern end and connections at the northern end. And I expect to see that road paralleling the open space associated with the creek line or the river line. So that interaction with the adjacent neighbour is going to be an important element as well. So in principle, supported, but I think that some further work and further research and further development and sort of move toward best practice is something that needs to be part of your development refinement process.
Yep. Can I just make a comment on that small neighborhood center that we're looking for there? It's meant to be a very low key spot, and it's meant to be connected. Well, hopefully the idea is that we can connect it to a community garden, so it backs onto that public open space that's going to be created in that southwest corner. And the idea of putting it down there near the river was to, well, I shouldn't say down there, it's quite flat, near the closer to the river, is that people who will be using that trail that will eventually connect and go right around Bowral, it's quite easy for them to just take a little small detour off that trail and go to that cafe or those facilities there. And in terms of a walkability analysis, it's reasonably walkable, and we were intending to focus the main movement routes to that particular corner through the site as well.
Yeah, well, I think that needs to be taken into account with provision of local open space that's accessible. Because you've got the linear pattern associated with the main river system. So really any location on that river system could be expanded to allow for public open space. There didn't seem to be a lot of public open space that's not flood prone, for example. So that's what I meant about some
I get it.
Perhaps review and refinement as part of the development process.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, as I said, if I may, early on, that we've done things at a fairly high level because we understand, having been through this process many, many times, that there's some refinement as we go through that process. And there's different interpretations too of how things may or may look that we need to work with council and the community and indeed other landowners on. But to get a planning proposal in, you've kind of got to put your best foot forward. And I think I accept your comments. I made the comment about the, shall I say, medium density. They were a response in early discussions with council officers about the success of some integrated housing elsewhere. But as I said, there are other ways of doing it, but sometimes that requires a little bit of tweaking, and sometimes the standard LEPs don't help us be too innovative in that. The last point I'd make is agree with you on the public open space. I mean, there's 40% of it, but most of it is in the floodplain. Indeed, it is. We can look at that, but also we're very conscious of passive security in public open space and other things, which I've had a lot of experience in, and want to make sure that that place is that those places are safe and observed and accessible. So I think we're on the same page.
We are. My own experience has been that by something very similar, by putting a public road along the edges of the space, you have, in Jane Jacobs' terms, eyes on the street and eyes on the space, and people take possession of it and care about it. The more that you intervene or put R5 between the road and the linear open space, the less control and less visibility, and the less safe people generally feel about using it. So it's something that I think needs to be further explored.
Yeah, I think you're right. If you, it's hard to see at the scale, but those R5s are in small pockets as opposed to a complete linear thing along the open space.
Sure.
So they're not intended to wall it off, and the connectivity for the public into the open space is paramount to that.
Yeah.
Larissa, was that all from you, Alf?
Yes, that's fine.
Larissa, did you have any questions?
No, I'm right. No, thank you.
Okay. Richard, did you have any questions?
Yes, I had an issue, I guess, that was partly answered by Mr. Dawson's second slide, the Machisi layout, but the layout in the report, the eastern section of the proposed residential area is only joined by the road at the southern end that basically goes over the floodplain. And there's no other access shown in this report. That Marquise layout, yes, that's the one, the yellow dotted lines, I see there is in fact a continuation to the east of that road. Has that been investigated with the landowners to the east?
Not entirely. There's been general discussion with the landowners in the landowners group meeting. What we were trying to represent here was, of course, we were doing our planning proposal on our own and before the landowners group was set up. So we tried to put in an indicative layout, but a very high-end indicative layout. We're not proposing that that's locked in stone. We accept completely that to get this through, to realise what we're all trying to achieve in this area, that there will have to be some detailed discussion, design and compromise around there. And it's got to be adaptable to those adjoining landowners. The problem we have, we all face though in redeveloping fragmented land is, which I've had quite a bit of experience in, is it can often be difficult to do that. Someone's got to take a lead. And then there needs to be some compromise along the way to get the land out. Councils in the old days, back in the 90s, like Blacktown Council and Liverpool Council were really good at it. It was done with fragmented land in places like North Kellyville reasonably well. It can be a difficult thing, but we put our best foot forward with what we had 14 months ago. We've had a lot of conversations with the local landowners, with our neighbours in the last 14 months, and I suspect that we could resolve that relatively easily. Right,
but as it stands at the moment, that eastern section is, in the case of a flood, is isolated simply by that road that runs across the floodplain. Well, not necessarily, because there could be an access, and I've got to look at another slide because I've got my people over it. I'll just move you. But there can be access on the easternmost side from Boardman Road up to Kangaloon Road, which isn't affected, I don't believe, by the flood zone. I think you're talking about this section here. Yeah, that's right. That crosses there, and that could easily be put over the 1 and 100 area. But there's very easy access through here and potential access through here up to Kangaloon Road, which completely services all of that eastern side. Well, I understand that, but that's within the other landowners' area. Indeed. I see what you're talking about. You're talking about this area here. Yeah. Understand that. Yeah, understand that. Well, we'd clearly have to resolve that through here, or resolve that on an exit through that one. Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, Julie, can I just ask one question? Sorry,
Sure.
while Angus or Sophie. Just a question. I did look at the minimum lot sizes that you're proposing, and I was just interested to know why the R3 zones, you've got them at 300, I think, meters squared, if I'm incorrect, and as a minimum lot size. So was that, normally they're larger lots because they look at, RFBs or something like that, but that maybe is not your intention here. And I just was interested to know why they're at 300. The others seem logical with the zone, but the R3, I was just interested to know that why at 300?
Yeah, again, Larissa, and I'm sorry to say this with my history with the Department of Planning, but when we're constrained by standard LEPs and standard zones, and we've just got to accept that, it's difficult. That's our addressing encouragement from discussions in the community and indeed with council about the success and the favour that similar things at Renwick and other developments in the area, particularly rear load ones, had. As I said in my opening statement, I'd really like to be able to do, it's the old Tony Sabimo come Delphin model where you can salt and pepper smaller lots, and they don't necessarily have to go down as far as 300 or anything else, but you can salt and pepper them in within a grid of 60 metres by changing frontages. And you can also introduce some rear load in doing that and get some really good outcomes. But at the moment, we're trying to work in with the line of least resistance, dare I say, but happy to talk it through.
Yeah, no worries. No, thank you. Thanks. I just wasn't sure. Thanks.
I have one final question I meant to ask. You noted in your commentary on infrastructure and wastewater, there were no constraints. My understanding is that there's a major constraint with the capacity of the existing sewage plant.
Yeah, I was interested to read that in the report. My understanding is the sewage plant has already started or is about to have its capacity doubled. But I'd have to refer to my learned friends in council about that.
Right. Okay.
I think it's in that process of doing that. By the time this would be up, that capacity will be doubled.
Yeah, I understand that there are discussions underway that nothing's happened. So I was just surprised that maybe you knew something else that we didn't.
No, but we're working on the understanding that is further ahead than discussions, but that would have to be something Mr. Park would need to respond on.
Sure.
Yep,
Okay.
look, I'm happy to provide some comments if you like. So council are working through the sort of detailed design and approval processes for a significant upgrade to the sewage treatment plant. So both Barrel and Moss Vale are sort of in the detailed design and approval processes. Mittagong is a little bit further behind, but we're certainly working towards an upgrade of the sewage treatment plant as we speak.
Okay.
So I didn't have any questions as such. I just wanted to make a comment to Mr. Dawson. I made a note that so there's a recommendation here for a master plan, and you talked about that being possibly a DCP, which makes sense to me. You also mentioned restrictions on title, and I just wanted to say there's no point doing that. We discovered I think it was Retford Park, Michael, perhaps you can correct me, because of clause 1.9a of the LEP, any provisions you put on the title would be of no effect if development consent was granted. So any design guidelines, etc., would need to be the subject of a DCP to have any weight. So I just thought I'd say that while I was thinking.
Thank you. And I think I was
paying the lawyers doing title things.
Yes, I know, aren't they horrible? I was trying to again exhibit our interest in identifying and resolving the fear. Let me be very candid about it. The fear of the community about character and how we might be able to do that, and saying that we were willing to go as far as restrictions or as far as covenants on title. It's a hugely vexed question in land development as to how you get these things done. But if you can get a really good LEP and DCP, generally speaking, you can get it right. But we'll work with council to get the right outcome. I think that's what we're trying to flag.
Yeah. All right. So if no one else has any more questions, then that's the last item in the meeting. So we'll now close the public part of the meeting. The time is 4:40 and we'll go into deliberative closed session and come back and announce our decision on the live stream, and the minutes should be on the website within 2 business days. Thank you all who came and gave presentations and answered our questions. Thank you to the council staff. So if Lisa could just stay